Initially, the wins were people saying, oh, I'm using DevMate, and then there was equally some people that were suffering. And that was when we started to experiment with things like unsupervised agents.
You've been interacting with an LLM, and it has to have the context of what you're doing. So what the Ripper 5 model does, it tells the LLM that ask me questions, analyze the code base of where you're at.
Treat your AI like a basic junior engineer. If you don't give him the full requirements of the task, he's not going to be able to figure it out.
When you have hundreds of metrics written in C#, you break it down into basically a bunch of similar tasks that can be verified in a standardized way.
One of the things that are really nice about communities is that everyone, you get so many different people at different levels of their experience and adoption. And this kind of like leans into one thing that you mentioned as well, which is like these maturity models. And I guess there's maturity in terms of how an individual is using it as well as a team. Talk us through the maturity models and why they're important.
So the thing about the maturity model, I intended it to be used for a team, but there is a dimension on there which is about individual productivity as well. So you can reflect on your own kind of performance and ways that you're getting value from it. The benefit of it being a team-based thing is that it opens up the conversation within your team.
Yes.
And so you can generate ideas and have action plans that are specific to you, because every team's going to have slightly different context or different levels of ability and different interests. So that's great. We tried to model it in a way that was going to be fairly agnostic of the tooling and be durable, because again, the value I think is that you can have these models and you can repeat the assessments time after time and see how you're progressing. And we do subtly tweak it every now and again, but generally it's kept fairly consistent.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, like I say, the teams run these assessment workshops and they can have the discussion, and that's where the real value lies.
Yeah. Let's talk about value and wins. What were the big wins that you saw, and how did you share that across the community?
So initially, the wins were people saying, oh, I'm using DevMate, which is part of our tool set in VS Code that we work with day to day. So I'm finding ways to use this to like understand the code base better or what have you. And there were some early examples of people just sort of going for a big problem and putting a prompt in, and they were getting a bit lucky. And then there was equally some people that were suffering that wasn't working at all.
Yeah.
But then we found there was kind of repeatable patterns emerging around things like test improvements, or how to make code quality improvements, or reducing complexity of code.
Yeah.
And that was when we started to experiment with things like unsupervised agents. And you could say, okay, with this category of problem, say like we've got test coverage gaps, we want to go and find all the files that are related to this part of the code base, related to this on-call, say, find the ones that have got the biggest coverage gaps, and then using this runbook that we've put together, go and cover them, go and produce diffs that help us to bridge the gap. And that was the sort of thing that would take lots of hours of manual work. And as this sort of evolved, we found actually we can go and use the tools to go and query the data, do the analysis, and then generate the tasks for itself to go and then fix the tests and add the coverage. And I think the end result was something like 93.5% coverage was achieved, which when we were way less than 60% to start off with. So, many diffs landed.
And it sounds like huge productivity gains.
You introduced a really interesting framework called Ripper, or Riper.
Ripper, it goes back and forth.
Ripper 5.
Yeah.
Why don't you introduce that to the audience, and then we can kind of like delve deeper into it.
It's first, to be fair, I didn't come up with it. It was, we discovered it on a blog post or a Cursor forum that was in, I think, March of this year or so, when we first ran across it. But what it stands for, it stands for research, innovate, plan, execute, and then review. So it's that plan, execute model, but it goes a little bit deeper. And the reason why I think it's so important is you've been interacting with an LLM, you've been in a chat console, and you're trying to do something, and it has to have the context of what you're doing. You don't always are in the same mindset. You may be trying to research a particular thing, but it jumps into coding. Or you may be planning and it jumps into coding. Or you're coding and it's not really doing any planning. So what the Ripper 5 model does is it provides a set of instructions that you can pass as a command. We're using Cursor. So we pass it as kind of property for our IDE to be able to have this context. So we give it a command, we say we're in research mode, and what that does is it tells the LLM that ask me questions, analyze the code base of where you're at, for example. But don't do, as important as what it can do is what it can't do. Don't do coding, don't do planning. Right now, I just want you to understand what the code is, what my spec is actually trying to do, so that way I can provide more details to refine the spec. So this Ripper 5, it's kind of like an execution model of how you work with the LLM, and we do that in pairing with the developer.
Why is context so important?
Yeah, I think you kind of got to treat your AI like a basic junior engineer. If you don't give him the full requirements of the task, he's not going to be able to figure it out, right?
Yeah.
So we need to make sure all the details that the AI needs to know, we're providing it.
Yeah.
And I think one really good way to do that as well is with MCPs and setting up some sort of documentation MCP, because there's oftentimes a lot of gaps in our code where the AI will read through your code but still not understand what's going on.
Yeah.
But when we give it access to our documentation, it can read that and fill in those gaps, which really, really boosts the productivity of what you can produce.
Yeah, amazing. And actually, in the session, I asked one of the questions, which was about how to know when to give enough context without giving so much context that it actually degrades the performance. And I guess that's what a lot of the things, like when we talk about cursor rules and the always apply and the apply manually, it's for exactly that reason. And I suspect when we look at if you had a huge amount of context that you wanted to provide, you were probably more likely to say, actually, there's too much context here. Let's add this either manually or add it more intelligently, apply it intelligently, so that way you're not actually bloating context for no reason.
Yeah.
Super interesting, and actually a really, really crucial part. Okay, one more cursor rule and we'll jump into Claude.
Yeah, let's do it. You can have a bunch of different rules. I think one that's particularly interesting, Claude shared this themselves, is relating to this context we just talked about. Oftentimes, if you get close to the end of your context window, so you've used up like 90%, then you ask the AI for something, it will give you a short answer because it's just trying to get something out before it runs out of context. But if you type in a prompt like this or something similar, you can tell it, hey, your context is going to end, but like, don't worry about that. You can compact it, actually give me the best answer. And that's one useful tip.
What would happen if you just said to an agent, here's my environment, I need you to migrate this, create a plan, and do it yourself?
Right.
What would be the problems?
So for a product like this, when you have hundreds of metrics, and each of them are underpinned with a bunch of code written in C#, with all the issues that I mentioned before about not all the context necessarily being exactly where you need it, there's a lot of complexity in that. You can't just open up even the state-of-the-art coding tools like Cursor and say, hey, please migrate all of our metrics into this new abstraction on this new framework. And by the way, convert from C# into writing SQL with a YAML for metric flow on top. It doesn't work to do that, is what we found. In order to get traction there, you have to really break down the mountain of that problem into small pieces. It sounds kind of obvious if you say it this way. You break it down into standardized, you break it down into basically a bunch of similar tasks that can be verified in a standardized way.
Yes.
And then you assign you basically construct a long task list with phases for individual sections of the task, like move these first 5 metrics as the first phase, and then the next, and so on.
And who's doing this? Is this humans doing this? Is this humans with agents as an assistant?
Right. So humans are choosing the task list, right? Are enumerating, okay, these are all of the metrics that we're going to enumerate, that we're going to migrate in phase 1, and these are the metrics that we're going to migrate in phase 2. So humans are making those choices, as well as what the target architecture is that we're going to be putting these things into. And humans are also, with some help from AI tools, are constructing all of the context that's going to go to the coding agents to actually enable them to do the migration work for those pieces.